Okay, let's convene this meeting for the President's Advisory Council on North Korea. We're here to discuss recent developments and discuss what course of action to take going forward. We need to develop a clear plan for how President Trump's administration should approach the political crisis with North Korea going forward. In the past, we've tried several methods, but none have been successful.
Absolutely. The United States' relationship with North Korea has always been strained. Since the end of the Korean War, which saw no clear winner or peace agreement, there has been constant back and forth between our two nations regarding North Korea's nuclear program. In the mid-1980s to the early 1990s, it seemed as though North Korea and the United States, as well as our allies, had reached an agreement. In 1985, North Korea joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, barring the country from producing nuclear weapons. Relationships further improved when in 1991, both North and South Korea joined the United Nations. However, by 1993, North Korea was accused of violating the Non-Proliferation Treaty and threatened to pull out of it altogether. From this point forward, North Korea has continued to threaten to develop and redevelop their nuclear program. Over multiple presidencies, the United States has been able to minimize the threats, but since Kim Jong-un, the current leader of North Korea, took power in 2011, there has been no clear path forward.
That's a super good summary of the history, and you can actually see throughout the history there are so many key players actually involved in the North Korean nuclear crisis, especially North Korea. When they violate the UN Non-Proliferation Treaty, they just creating war tensions, and there's a lot of crises bring forward. Domestically for North Korea, there are a lot of human rights violation because of the development of the nuclear program. And among the world, because we know that North Korea is just an irrational factor, we don't know how to deal with them and the nuclear weapon they have. And US from outside, we all know that we're constantly trying to promote international safety and denuclearize North Korea weapon, but a major failure that we encounter is that we never let China to cooperate with us, because China is the major trader and dealer with North Korea. So if we cannot convince China to impose sanctions on North Korea, there will always be resources continue provide to North Korea, so there will not be enough threat for North Korea to really abandon their nuclear weapons. Also, we're trying to cooperate with South Korea and Japan, especially in South Korea. We have nuclear countering thought systems, but because of the South Korea and China's tension continue raising, so I heard from that South Korea citizen actually not a fan for thought. So that's something we need to reconsider for the past step too. So here's the video that explains where we are right now.
At the DMZ, in Singapore, and in Pyongyang, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has repeatedly promised to dismantle its nuclear weapons. But after months of negotiations, Washington says it wants to see more concrete action. And many U.S. officials suspect that North Korea has actually been expanding its nuclear arsenal.
Since President Trump has taken office, the U.S. has taken a tougher stance on North Korea's nuclear missile program. This has led to tensions reaching a new height, which is also caused by North Korea's escalation in their nuclear program. They've increased the amount of nuclear tests they've attempted, which has created further strain between them and other countries in the region. Fortunately, President Trump was able to meet with Kim Jong-un earlier this year to discuss the relationships between the two countries and the possible denuclearization of North Korea. While this conference was deemed a leadership success at the time, nothing has really come of it, and there's been no clear steps that have been taken to resolve tension or ensure North Korea's denuclearization. We've failed to continue negotiations, and earlier this month, Secretary of State Pompeo canceled his meeting with the top North Korean official, leaving us in a stalemate.
So over the course of the US and North Korea relationship, there have been a couple of mistakes that we made when we're trying to address this North Korean nuclear crisis. The first mistake is definitely the sanction that we try to impose on North Korea by multiple presidential administrations have increased the tension in the regions and did not actually deter North Korea from re-establishing their programs and testing their nuclear weapons. And the second mistake that we made is during the negotiations between our two countries. We have never looked North Korea as a rational player on the world stage. In order to approach this problem from a diplomatic standpoint, and instead of trying to use coercion to solve the problem, we really need to change our outlook on North Korea and stop the conflicting mode of communication. And the third way is the way we're trying to engage with other key player might not be the best. We're trying to put THAAD system in South Korea in order to counter any North Korea missile that launch from North Korea, but we didn't aware of that this actually ruined the South Korea and China relationship, and we missed the point that South Korea will be dependent on China economically because they're super close with each other, and we're just too far to create other additional support if there's any bad thing happens to South Korea. So we need to reconsider from this and trying to consider other standpoint when we're trying to engage with other key player in this problem.
While the diplomatic approach is our chosen form of action, there are other possible alternatives to resolving this crisis. This includes a militaristic approach or an attempt to fuel resistance internally. The militaristic approach would consist of strong military action against North Korea, either through an actual invasion or through heavy missile and bomb attempts. This is not the preferred solution though, because while the US would certainly vanquish North Korea, it would waste valuable resources and endanger military and civilian lives. With a leader as unstable as Kim Jong-un, a direct military attack could provoke him to intentionally target civilian lives. In terms of building resistance internally, there are a few challenges which would make this approach extremely difficult to actually pulling off. There's very little resistance within North Korea currently due to Kim Jong-un's authoritarian hold over his country and the inability for information to flow in from the outside. Within any resistance, North Korea would most likely not be receptive to the input of outside voices into their revolution. Lastly, if American revolutionaries were discovered by North Korea, this would at best destroy any attempt at diplomatic relations between our two countries, and at worst could lead to all-out war, which would endanger civilian lives.
When dealing with North Korea, the United States has had leadership successes and failures. Although the conference between President Trump and North Korea was considered a leadership success, we've seen that there were mistakes made, and, for example, canceling the meeting between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the North Korean leader has worsened our relationship. Going forward, the United States needs to take a more diplomatic approach to the North Korean nuclear threat. Over the course of history, we have seen military action does not deter North Korea from developing their program. Also, a coercive leadership attempt when working with North Korea will not work and has failed in the past. This means that going forward, we need to work with North Korea to denuclearize their country. Through diplomacy, both countries will need to make compromises, but I'm confident that communication and integrated bargaining will ultimately create an ideal solution where the threat of nuclear attack is neutralized. We all agree that diplomacy is the best course of action at the time, but this crisis is constantly changing, which means that our approach to the crisis also needs to change. We need to be constantly reevaluating our relationship with North Korea and other possible solutions.
So it's confirmed that this council has decided to formally recommend to President Trump to remain diplomatic and begin attempts to compromise with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. We recommend that sanctions be partially lifted to promote discussions between the two nations. Although this tactic is much different from the coercive tactics taken in the past, this administration is working to prevent the re-establishment of North Korea's nuclear plan. If North Korea fails to denuclearize and refuses to compromise, the President's administration should return to its tactic of using force to work through this conflict and should strengthen sanctions again. We realize that our plan may fail early on in the conflict process because of the emotional instability of the leaders involved, and if that is the case, this council will need to reconvene to discuss a new course of action. Although we're really willing to attempt integrative bargaining, North Korea has to be willing to make concessions.